الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah for the ni'mah of this Tuesday night, this night in which we seek the tawassul of Ahlul Bayt, where we have the opportunity to discuss and to learn from the lives and the biographies of the family of the Holy Prophet. In our continuing discussion, we've reached to the discussion that talks about our 8th Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Radha alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This Imam's lifespan is typically split into 3 portions. One is his childhood until the time of his ascension to Imam al-Zahir. The second is his period of Imamat, which is split into 2 sections. One before his appointment as Naib Khalifa, and finally as his Naib Khalifa, Niyabat as the Khalifa, the successor of the Khalifa of the time. The most famous of these time periods is the third, which only encompassed 3 years of his life, and where his life was, mashallah, for a period of 53 years. So the other earlier 50 years is actually full of great depth and information, as well as guidance from the Imam and teaching from the Imam that we benefit from in many of our affairs and many places. The discussion around the first phase of the Imam's life can also be further split into one, his childhood with his father and his youth without his father. When we talked about the biography of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, we did mention that, mashallah, he had in minimum in reports of 34 children or 35 children. But also the Imam did spend one of the longest time periods of any of the Imams in prison, where at least 14 years of his 34 years of Imamat were spent in prison, according to many of the narrators of history and hadith that we possess. So therefore, that means that before Imam Radha became the Imam of the time, for at least 14 years of that time period, he was without the care of his father. So therefore, this time period too has a lot of detail and information that we can look into and talk about various aspects as well. So therefore, as we begin the discussion around Imam Radha, it's important to understand that from his birth, he was someone who was special. Now, first and foremost, we know the father of Imam Radha is Imam Musa al-Kadhim. However, the discussion about the existence of Imam Radha begins before the marriage of, or before the birth of Imam Radha. It's actually narrated that Imam Sadiq would foretell and tell Imam al-Kadhim about the birth of Imam Radha. So very famously, Imam Kadhim would hear from his father, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, who would say that very soon, "O my son Musa, you will have a child who will be the Alim Ali Muhammad, the scholar of Ali Muhammad. And I wish that I would have the chance to meet him." And essentially, Imam Sadiq explained and said that Imam Sadiq would die before the birth of Imam Radha, but that Imam Radha would be the scholar of Ali Muhammad, Alim Ali Muhammad. Now, before we go any further, the interesting point of this title being given by Imam Sadiq to Imam Radha is pretty fascinating. If you were to ask any of us who is the scholar of Ali Muhammad, we would all say Imam Sadiq. We're actually named Madhab Ja'fari after the teachings of Imam Sadiq because of the extensive work that Imam Sadiq did in teaching. So you would imagine that if anyone was supposed to be known the scholar of Ahlul Bayt, it would be Imam Sadiq. But here's Imam Sadiq himself saying that no, the scholar of Ali Muhammad has not been born yet, and I wish that I could meet him. When the companions of Imam Sadiq would also ask, where does the imamat go after you? Where does leadership go after you? The danger to the life of Imam Musa al-Kazim was such that Imam Radha would have to, or Imam Sadiq would have to explain this through allegorical means of saying, for example, this son of mine will have born to him the scholar of Ahlul Bayt. Meaning that the explanation was that the Imam can only be born to an Imam, and then therefore Imam Musa al-Kadhim was the Imam, and Imam Radha would be the Imam after him. So Imam Sadiq actually narrated this a number of times and would even say, I wish I could meet him. Very famously, we talk about the Shahadat of Imam Sadiq in the month of Shawwal, and 11 Dhul Qa'dah is the birth of Imam Radha. So it's very famous to say that right before, in the month prior to the birth of Imam Radha, is when Imam Sadiq was martyred and made shaheed. The title Alim Ali Muhammad, the scholar of Ali Muhammad, and why is it that Imam Sadiq is giving this title to Imam Radha? There are a few opinions about this, and the essential consensus is that while it's true that Imam Sadiq was the teacher and was the one who laid out all of this information for people to use, Imam Radha's time period where he was outwardly facing and interacting with many of the Christians, the atheists, the Jews, the Zoroastrians, and people of other faiths, where he was the physical representation of the teachings of Islam. So, for example, to be a scholar is to be recognized as a scholar by both friend and foe, and to be the voice and the notoriety and the publicity of being that sense of leadership and authority, and hence being seen as the scholarly authority on the subject, which was one of the things that Imam Radha accomplished in his dawr, that the Khulafa used to push him forward, and then society had come to the point where they could recognize that there was some unique scholarship coming about, and the source of that unique scholarship was the Ahlul Bayt, and that to learn about the scholarship of Islam, you had to go to Imam Radha. So it's believed that his being the scholar of Ali Muhammad was that he was the outward representation that both Shia, non-Shia, Muslim, Christian, Jew, Zoroastrian, atheist, philosopher all recognize that the teachings of Ahlul Bayt are represented inside of this one person. And if we want to learn about what he has to teach, or what Islam has to say, or the Ahlul Bayt have to say, we have to go to al-Radha. His title, Radha, is also an interesting point of discussion in that it means one who is well pleased or one who is satisfied. Now, some people actually made the claim to the Ahlul Bayt that Imam Radha was given the title Radha by Ma'mun. Ma'mun is the one who made Imam Radha his successor. And he announced that, Hādhihi Radha, this is the one who is Radha, the one who I am pleased with making my successor. And that the title originated from here. And the answer to this given by the Ahlul Bayt was that no, this is not the reason that he is known as al-Radha. He is known as al-Radha because he was the one who was well pleased as Allah's creation, present in front of Allah. So they asked, Awalaysa kullukum ar-Radha? Aren't all of you Radha? Aren't all of you pleased in front of the eyes of Allah? And the answer came, yes, we are. But this one was the one who was the one that was well pleased and satisfied and satisfying to both the friend and the enemy. And none before him had achieved this status. Let me explain what that means. If you take a look at the Imamat of Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain, Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Baqir, Imam Sadiq, all of them had outward persecution from the Khulafa, especially Imam Kadhim, right? That he was persecuted for 14 years in prison. The outward persecution, the apparent persecution, took place to all of the Imams, but Imam Radha was that one that the enemy was saying, no, I'm satisfied that he should be with me. So that the outward and apparent persecution wasn't evident in the case of Imam Radha, and therefore he was the one that even the enemy had to act like he was pleased with him and happy with him and give him status and position, versus the fact that we would say that he was persecuted or put into prison like all of the Imams before him. So hence his title of al-Radha is something that is explained as saying that he was one that whether you were his enemy or as your friend, you were pleased by him and accepted him, and he was a personality who was pleasing to everyone before him. Another title that is known about Imam al-Radha is called Abul Hasan al-Thani as a kunya. Abu al-Hasan al-Thani means the father of Hassan the second. Abu al-Hasan al-Awwal is Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. So meaning Imam al-Kadhim, his kunya, his title was Abu al-Hasan. The same way when we look at Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, his title was Abu Abdullah. There's one other person who has a title of Abu al-Hasan, but he isn't referred to as Abu al-Hasan, and that's Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Whenever we read narrations that reference Abu al-Hasan or Abu al-Hasan al-Thani, we automatically know that Abu al-Hasan is Imam al-Kadhim and Abu al-Hasan al-Thani is Imam Radha. Amir al-Mu'mineen being Abu al-Hasan is not one of the lak al-Kab by which, or the kunya by which he is known. Rather, he is known as Amir al-Mu'mineen. Rather, he is known as Ibn Abi Talib. Rather, he is known by his other titles. Though he was Abu al-Hasan, when you read hadith and classic literature and books of rijal and information, Abu al-Hasan refers to Imam al-Kadhim, and Abu al-Hasan al-Thani refers to Imam Radha. Now, what's very interesting is that this title of Abu al-Hasan al-Thani was established by Imam al-Kadhim in his life. That Imam Kadhim, whenever he would call Imam Radha, he would call him Abu al-Hasan in front of everyone and say that Hadi Abu al-Hasan, this is Abu al-Hasan. So meaning he himself had this title and he gave his son this title as well in his own life. Why would, for example, Imam al-Kadhim give this title to Imam Radha? One of the explanations was that amongst all of the children of Imam Kadhim, he wanted to single out and show the dignity and honor of Imam Radha. So therefore, he would call him by a title, not by his name, even from a very early age, with the interest of making sure that people recognize that this child of Imam Kadhim was different. Now remember something. The life of Imam Kadhim, from the beginning of his imamate and at the end of his imamate, was a time period in which the Muslimin split into very many different directions. That we remember when we talked about the Shahad Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he had to appoint 5 successors. He couldn't directly appoint Imam Kadhim because of the danger to the life of Imam al-Kadhim. The same way at the end of the life of Imam al-Kadhim, the Shia again split into different directions because of the fact that they felt that there wasn't enough information for them to gather and understand who the Imam of the time would be. Because remember, Imam Kadhim had been in prison for 14 years. So if you hadn't been asking, you didn't know who Imam Kadhim would appoint as the Imam. So therefore, the signs of the appointment of Imam Radha as the Imam, one of them was the title of Abu al-Hasan, that he, from his very young age, where normally you receive a title of father of Hassan or father of someone when you have children. Imam Radha was being called Abu al-Hasan when he was still a young boy. Not married, not mature yet, to show the dignity, the honor, and the status that Imam Radha possessed. Now, this period of 34 years of the life of Imam Radha before he becomes the Imam apparent, the life of 34 years under his father, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, is a very important time period, and it lays a lot of precedence for us of what comes after Imam Radha. Let me explain what I mean by that. It's narrated and said that from the birth of Imam Radha, he was very special and very different. And his mother was someone who was not like other ladies. The mother of Imam Radha is called Najma or Tuqtam. And there are many other titles that she possesses as well too. She was someone who was purchased as a slave and then set free. She's called Walad, which is an Arabic term that refers to someone who was purchased as a slave at some point in time. But because of her children being born free, she becomes free when her husband or when her husband passes away, that she is now considered free, and this is known as Walad. There are a number of narrations that talk about how it is that Imam Musa al-Kadhim got married to Najma. There are some narrations that say that his mother Hamida had received a maid in her service, and Hamida would say that I saw in my dream that that the Prophet instructed me my son should marry this maid of mine named Najma. There are other narrations that say that the Imam sent for this lady to be purchased specially so that she would be kept away from many of the problems and brought into the house of Imam al-Kadhim. And that some that describe and say that it was Imam al-Kadhim who received wahi, not wahi, astaghfirullah, he received instruction from the Holy Prophet in his dreams that would give him instruction to marry this lady by the name of Tuqtam or Najma and where he would find her. But essentially, all of the conversations point to the fact that this was a personality who was known for her piety even before she married Imam al-Kadhim. And she was known for her purity, such that when she gives birth to Imam Radha, Imam al-Kadhim starts to call her Tahira, the one who is pure and a source of purity. So in this way, the mother of Imam Radha is special for her ibadat and worship as well. Now, there are many discussions about the children of Imam al-Kadhim, but one that seems to be very consistent is that this wife of Imam al-Kadhim, who was known as Najma or Tuktam, after the birth of Imam Radha becomes known as Tahira, and she has one more child, which is at a gap of almost 20 years between Imam Radha and the next child that she has. And that child is Bibi Fatima Masooma Bibi Masooma Ekum, was known as, her proper name is Fatima. And that these two are the two children of Bibi Tahira. And that both of these share a personality of piety and good character. As we mentioned before, that the impact of the mother also plays a role on the children that are born, that these two children become the direct example of the children of this lady, Bibi Tahira, who is the mother of both Imam Radha and Bibi Masooma, both of whom were luminary examples from amongst the children, the most luminous examples amongst the children, Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. The narrations about his mother and her piety was that she asked for assistance in the raising of Imam Radha when he was a baby. And they asked her, do you have a problem? Or is it not possible for you to raise him? And she said, no, but rather I have a habit of spending my life in ibadat. And since the birth of this son of mine, I need assistance to continue with the amount, to raise him so that I may continue the amount of ibadat that I do for the sake of Allah. So her piety was very famous as well too. Imam Radha from a very young age was distinguished in showing signs of deep intelligence and knowledge and information about the Quran and Islam and the teaching and the learning of Islam. This is very important to understand, that Imam Kadhim starts introducing his son and showing his son's knowledge and information from approximately the ages of 3, and at 7 he starts bringing him into scholarly circles where Imam Radha at the age of 7 was interacting with the highest level of scholarship of Islam and showing himself to be one who is educated and capable of teaching even at that level from the age of 7. The significance of this is that this was someone at the age of 7 whose knowledge and scholarship was authenticated and verified under the authority of Imam al-Kadhim as he went and he spoke and he taught and he was involved in the circles from the age of 7. At the age of 12, they would even describe and say that we would see scholars coming to sit with him and him having classes that he would be teaching. But from the age of 7, interacting with society at large and teaching them and being a source of education for them was something that Imam Musa al-Kadhim introduced, condoned, and showed off that his son had this knowledge. Understand why this is significant. Imam Jawad, the son of Imam Radha, begins his official imamat at 8, and Imam al-Hadi begins his official imamat at 7, and Imam Zaman begins his official imamat at 5. Now, this didn't happen without precedence. The precedence was Imam Radha, that Imam Radha being in scholarly circles from 7, and Imam al-Kadhim being present to say that go ask him and he will answer your questions. Go to my child who is of a very young age and learn from him. Was Imam Kadhim teaching and saying that our children and those who are the imams have pure and perfect knowledge from the moment they're born, and they can teach from that earliest time. So there are narrations that, for example, in the city of Medina, in the Prophet's mosque, there would be many scholars teaching and learning, and Imam Radha, as a young boy, would be sitting against one of the pillars inside of the masjid. And whenever a scholar couldn't answer one of the questions that he would ask, he would point over to Imam Radha and say, go ask this one, he will answer your question. So that Imam Radha was answering the questions the scholars couldn't answer. The scholars of Medina, the scholars who took honor and priority of the fact they were teachers inside of the Prophet's masjid, had to point to this young boy and say, ask him, he has the answers that we do not have. And therefore, Imam Radha from a very young age became very famous for answering questions and being a teacher who would guide all of humanity in his direction. There are a variety of different elements along with his aspect of teaching that showed the people that this was the next Imam to come. From amongst them, during the life of his father, as a child, he cured a blind child and brought back his vision. Another boy who was very sick, Imam Radha prayed for him and he immediately became healthy. He went through, and when other young children were around him playing, the young children found a dead bird. They brought it to Imam Radha, who was also a child. And Imam Radha prayed, and the bird came back to life. And this was one of the proofs of his Imam. There was a drought that took place in the city of Medina. And it was the prayer of Imam Radha that made the drought end and rain return to the city. There was an instance where a man came who had no children and asked for children. Imam Radha explained to him, and he said, you will have a son and his name will be Hamza. And the man says, but my wife is barren. There's no way for us to have children. And sure enough, after the dua and the command of Imam Radha, he had a child, and that child was named Hamza after that. There are instances where people would come to Imam Musa ibn Ja'far and bring wealth. And Imam Musa ibn Ja'far would say, present this wealth to my son Rida. And Imam Radha, as a very little child, would sit there and look at the coins and say, this is a real coin, this is a counterfeit coin, this is from permissible means, this is from impermissible means. And whenever he was researched of what he would say, it was proven true. So what Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was doing was making sure that people recognize the authority of Allah on this earth from a very young age, and showing the miracle of imamat and the knowledge of imamat, so that eventually when Imam Jawad and Imam al-Hadi would come in front of people and their fathers wouldn't be there, the Shia would never doubt that this could be an imam. They had seen it in the example of Imam Radha, which is why the Imam al-Kadhim, would tell his children that this is Alim Ali Muhammad. This is the authority of Allah. This is the Imam after me. This is the one who is in charge of all of your affairs, to his own children. And then he would say to his companions, Ana hujjatullahi alaykum wa hadha hujjati alaykum. I am the authority of Allah over you, and this is my authority over you. As Imam Radha was a little boy, was a young man. From the age of 12, very famously, his process of teaching and learning and announcing to the people became very apparent. Even during the periods of his father's imprisonment, Imam Radha was going through the process of teaching and guiding humanity and being a source of guidance. Now, it's very important to understand, as we take a holistic view of the title of Imamah, is that the imprisonment of Imam al-Kadhim did not mean that Imam al-Kadhim was not acting as the Imam. No, he was still acting as the Imam. But Imam Radha was in this time also a guide to humanity who could not reach the Imam directly. This concept of going to a second system of leadership when you can't approach the Imam of the time, one of the fundamentals that we do today of going to scholars, going to teachers, going to guides, is because we saw it happen in the time of Imam al-Kadhim. That Imam al-Kadhim would guide people to the scholars, and the greatest of scholars at the time was Imam Radha. That Imam Radha would be the one who would go and guide all of humanity and people. The same way, in the absence of the 12th Imam, we go to the best scholars that we can find, the most knowledgeable scholars, and they become the authority over us in giving us guidance. This too was a system of precedence that was established in the Dawah of Imam al-Kadhim. But other than simply Imam Radha guiding people, Imam Kadhim too, in his time imprisonment, would answer the needs of the Shia, would meet with the Shia wherever possible, openly and sometimes privately. He was someone who in his prison showed so many miracles that they would have a difficult time either keeping guards there or keeping him in the prison. Where, for example, the prison of Fadl, he says that I have seen this man do worship of Allah in such a way that if Harun had seen Musa ibn Ja'far worship this way, he would have set Musa ibn Ja'far free from the prisons himself. We saw that Imam al-Kadhim converted many of the guards that were there to keep him and to oppress him. His piety was such that the worst of humanity would become followers and devout followers of the Imam because of his interaction. Was a source of guidance. The Imam would at times commit miracles where they would say empty cells, we would hear from them the dhikr coming. And when we would go take a look, these empty cells, how are they doing dhikr? We would see the lips of Musa ibn Ja'far move in his cell far away, and the walls repeating the dhikr of Musa ibn Ja'far, repeating the whispered prayers of Musa ibn Ja'far echoing through the walls of the prisons. They would describe and say, we saw the walls of prisons turn into sources of light. Remember, in those days, it was only light by candle or lamp. There was no electricity. There was no ambient lighting, so to speak. There was no LEDs that you could hide in places, but they would say that the walls around Musa ibn Ja'far would turn into lights. Imam al-Kadhim would answer the questions of Hisham ibn Hakam and others who were in need. They would be able to get access from the Imam. And the same way that the Imam, how did we know of the Shahad Imam Musa ibn Ja'far? He had met with the Shia who had received permission to meet with the Imam for a few minutes in the prison of Sindi ibn Shahid, the last prison the Imam was in, that Mal'un Sindi, that his guards allowed some of the Shia to speak to Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, and he said, in 3 days, I'll be able to meet you on the bridge of Baghdad. I am to be released. So meaning the Imam was, even though he was in prison, was guiding people. But along with his guidance, he introduced the role of Imam Radha as the next Imam by empowering him and giving him the authority to go and guide people, answer their questions, solve their problems, and give the miracles of Allah to those to bring about hidayah and guidance in society. So this period of back and forth we saw going on, that you had the Imam acting, but because he was constrained by the prison, that he empowered Imam Radha to also bring guidance, and that people would recognize who the Imam was after Imam al-Kadhim. So which is why 14 years in this lifetime, that it was that Imam Kadhim being in prison, Imam Radha was acting as the leader of both his family and the leader of the Ummah and the guide of the Ummah for those who could not reach Imam Kadhim directly themselves. There's one of these very interesting stories that says that during the time of Imam al-Kadhim, someone came to the house of Imam Kadhim to ask some questions. And a young daughter of Imam al-Kadhim came to say that my father is not here. They said, we came with questions. Is there anyone who can assist us? And the young daughter said, give me your questions and come back tomorrow or come back later to receive their answer. So sure enough, those people who had been traveling to ask Imam al-Kadhim these questions, they went to the house and there they left their questions, and then they came back after some time. And the same young girl came and gave them a piece of paper and said, your questions have been answered. And she returned the question paper back to these people. They took the question paper because they had a limited amount of time, and they started traveling out of the city of Medina. And as they were leaving the city of Medina, by chance, Imam al-Kadhim was coming back to Medina, and they ran into him. And they went to Imam al-Kadhim and said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, we wanted to ask you questions. You weren't there. We asked from your house. A young daughter gave us these answers. Can you validate, now that we see you, can you answer our questions directly? And Imam al-Kadhim looks at the paper, looks at the answers, and says, may her father be sacrificed upon her. May her father be sacrificed upon her. May her father be sacrificed upon her. And said that all of the answers my daughter has given you are correct. This young daughter was Bibi Fatima bint Musa, or Bibi Masoomeen as we know her, was answering the questions and giving guidance and offering assistance to people, showing from a young age that she too possessed the knowledge of Ahlul Bayt and the guidance of Ahlul Bayt in the house of Imam al-Kadhim. So these two children, along with the other children, the other pious children of Imam al-Kadhim, were assistants to people, but the authority over all of them was Imam Radha. And the answer to all the questions and the guidance to all of society was Imam Radha. And which is why that we see this early period of lifetime, the authentication of Imamat and the authority of Imamat was done under the guidance of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, and was a precedent established for the dawr of Imam Jawad, for Imam al-Hadi, as well as the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman. Inshallah, we'll continue this discussion next week on the phases of the life of Imam Radha and what we can learn from the biography of Imam Radha. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الإحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, by the right of Ahlul Bayt, خصوصا by the right of our seventh Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, whose shahadat is this week, and the right of our eighth Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Radha. Oh Allah, we ask that you please fulfill our legitimate hajat. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Those amongst our family, our community who are suffering through sickness, give them shafa'ah. O Allah, those who are suffering through strife and insecurity, give them aman. O Allah, bring peace to the believers wherever they are in this earth by the right of Ahlul Bayt. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Protect our children from the evil and the machinations of this time and of these difficulties that exist today. O Allah, make us from the upright supporters of Ahlul Bayt. Hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. And entitle us to the ziyarat of Ahlul Bayt in this world and the shafa of Ahlul Bayt in the hereafter. Remembering all of our marhumeen, all those who have passed away recently, all those who have no one to pray for them. 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.